You already know how this story ends. Ash, bodies frozen mid-scream. A mountain that erupted without mercy. But here's what almost nobody tells you. Everything you think you know about Pompeii begins with a misconception. Pompeii wasn't Roman. It wasn't even founded by Romans. And by the time the mountain finally killed it, Pompeii had already survived war, siege, betrayal, and a warning it had 17 years to ignore. And here's a number almost nobody gets right. How many people actually died in Pompeii that day? Not a guess. Not a movie number. The real answer is nothing close to what you think. Hold on to that question, because everything in this file is quietly building toward it, and the answer will change how you see every single body they ever pulled out of that ash. So what if I told you the eruption isn't even the most interesting part of this story? This is the entire history of Pompeii, not just the last 24 hours, the full 700 years that led to them, the founders nobody remembers, the empire that tried to erase their language, the rivalry that turned into a massacre, and the mountain that waited longer than any civilization in that city ever expected it to. If you've only ever seen the ending, you don't actually know this story yet. This is the dossier, all of it. Here's the detail that surprises almost everyone. Rome didn't build Pompeii. It inherited someone else's masterpiece. Around 600 BC, before Rome had grown into anything more than a small settlement on the Tiber River, a people called the Oscans were already building a city on the coast of southern Italy. Pompeii is older than the empire that would eventually claim it. So why did the Oscans choose this exact patch of coastline? Because location, in the ancient world, was destiny. This site sat right at the mouth of the Sarno River, close to the Bay of Naples, which meant it could pull in trade goods flowing down from the interior, and ships arriving from across the entire Mediterranean at the same time. Whoever held this ground controlled the gateway, and that gateway sat on some of the richest farmland in the region. Here's the part historians rarely mention. The ground beneath Pompeii was built from ancient volcanic rock soil so mineral-rich, it made the surrounding land extraordinarily fertile. Pompeii owed its wealth to the very force that would eventually erase it. Nobody knew that yet. The mountain behind the city was simply called Vesuvius, green, peaceful, covered in farmland on its lower slopes. For nearly 700 years, it gave absolutely no warning of what it actually was. The Oscans built 5 small villages that gradually merged into a single fortified town, with early ramparts protecting the growing population. Each village likely kept its own local identity even after unification, a pattern of layered community that would still be visible in Pompeii's neighborhood centuries later. This wasn't a blank patch of land waiting for Rome to arrive and civilize it. Excavations of the earliest layers show pottery, bronze tools, and personal ornaments, evidence of a genuinely independent culture, trading and building long before any outside power ever set foot here. That's not even the surprising part. Pompeii's location made it rich. It was about to make it a target. If you're already this deep into a 2,000-year-old mystery, that probably means you're exactly the kind of person this channel was built for. Comment, still here, so I know you made it this far. And subscribe, because the deeper this file goes, the stranger it gets. 2 of the ancient Mediterranean's great powers looked at this coastline. Both of them decided they wanted it. The Greeks and the Etruscans. The Greeks arrived first, bringing new architectural and religious traditions with them, including a large Doric temple dedicated to Apollo. Its foundations still survive at the site today, one of the earliest examples of monumental religious architecture in the entire region. Then the Etruscans took over. Already one of the great commercial powers of early Italy, the Etruscans transformed Pompeii into a genuine trading hub, plugging it directly into a network stretching across the western Mediterranean. Greek colonies, Phoenician outposts, and everything in between. They laid the earliest paved roads, the first organized drainage systems. Here's the part historians rarely mention. Modern excavation has actually found Etruscan infrastructure buried beneath what most visitors assume is purely Roman engineering. Rome didn't invent the foundations of this city, it inherited them. So what happened to Etruscan power here? In 474 BC, a Greek naval fleet from Syracuse crushed the Etruscans in a decisive battle at Cumae. Etruscan influence over Pompeii collapsed almost overnight. History hates empty spaces. The moment one power disappeared from this coastline, another was already moving in, and that collapse left something behind, a genuinely blended city. Archaeologists can trace distinct Greek and Etruscan craftsmanship layered within the same excavated strata. Even the religious legacy lasted. Gods introduced in this era were still being worshipped in Pompeii's temples right up until its final day, more than 500 years later. Hold on to that thought, because the power vacuum left behind after Cumae didn't stay empty for long. Something far more dangerous than a trading rival was about to come down from the mountains. Pompeii had already survived 2 civilizations. It was about to meet the one that changed everything. The people who took Pompeii next weren't sailors. They weren't merchants. They were fighters. The Samnites, a fiercely independent mountain people from the Apennines, invaded and seized the city in 424 BC, executing its established leaders in the process. And unlike the Greeks or the Etruscans before them, the Samnites didn't just pass through, they stayed, for longer than any power before them, which raises an obvious question: how does a decentralized mountain culture, built entirely around highland warfare, suddenly govern a sophisticated coastal trading city? Better than you'd expect. The Samnites built a far more substantial stone defensive wall, sections of which still stand today. They reintroduced Oscan as the dominant language, a linguistic shift that would outlast even the eventual arrival of Rome. And despite their reputation as rough warriors, they developed a genuinely sophisticated system of local governance, elected magistrates, a functioning civic assembly, real political voice for ordinary free residents. That governmental structure would later directly shape how Rome itself administered the city once it finally took control. The conquerors, in other words, weren't erased by Rome. They were absorbed into it. Even Pompeii's distinctive grid-pattern street layout, the one most visitors today assume is Roman, actually dates from this Samnite expansion. A forward-thinking design, planned for growth that hadn't even happened yet. The Samnites had built something formidable, a real city with real infrastructure, real government, and real military strength, which meant that when Rome finally turned its attention south, this wasn't going to be an easy conquest. Every generation that fought for this ground added another layer to what would eventually be buried. Keep that number from the hook in mind. Every fighter, every farmer, every family who chose to stay here across 700 years, that's the population the mountain eventually inherited. Rome had finally arrived, and Pompeii's neighbors were about to discover the true cost of standing in its way. By the 4th century BC, Rome's expanding influence was pushing directly into Samnite territory. A collision was inevitable, and it did not go the way Rome expected. In 321 BC, the Samnites inflicted one of the most humiliating defeats in early Roman history, trapping an entire Roman army at a mountain pass called the Caudine Forks, forcing them to surrender and march beneath a symbolic yoke in front of their enemies. Imagine that. The empire that would one day rule the known world, publicly humiliated by the same people who built the city this entire story is about. So how does an empire recover from a humiliation like that? The same way every enduring power recovers, by refusing to forget it. Roman commanders spent the following decades rebuilding, adapting their tactics specifically to counter the kind of mountain warfare that had just cost them everything. 3 Samnite wars followed, spanning more than half a century of shifting alliances and brutal fighting. Historians consider this entire conflict genuinely formative for the Roman military, the exact experience that taught Roman legions how to fight an unconventional enemy, lessons they'd later use across the entire Mediterranean. That's not even the surprising part. Eventually, Rome won, but notice how it chose to win. In 290 BC, Pompeii accepted treaty status as an allied city as socii, not conquered outright, not annexed. Rome let Pompeii keep its internal governance and its Oscan language in exchange for supplying troops and warships whenever Rome needed them. This wasn't generosity, it was strategy, a way to expand Roman military reach without the burden of directly governing every single community it touched. And Pompeii proved its value fast. During the brutal Second Punic War, with Hannibal's army rampaging across Italy, Pompey stayed loyal to Rome, refusing to defect despite the immense pressure. That loyalty bought Pompeii something rare: 2 centuries of stability, prosperity, and growing trade. Wine and olive oil exports began flowing out to the wider Mediterranean. The city even built its first stone amphitheater during this period, decades before the version tourists visit today. For nearly 200 years, this arrangement held. Then Pompey asked Rome for something Rome wasn't ready to give. 200 years of loyalty, and Pompey still wasn't considered Roman enough. After 200 years of fighting and dying in Rome's wars, Pompeii and other allied Italian cities wanted the one thing they'd never been given: full Roman citizenship. A Roman senator, Marcus Livius Drusus, had actually proposed extending citizenship to Rome's allies, right before he was assassinated by political opponents in Rome itself. His death removed the last realistic path to a peaceful resolution, which left only one option. In 91 BC, the social war erupted, drawing in nearly every major Italian community south of the Po River. Pompeii joined openly, reinforcing its walls, arming every available young man for the fight that was coming. And it came fast. Rome sent one of its most ruthless commanders to end the rebellion, a general named Lucius Cornelius Sulla, who would later go on to seize dictatorial power over Rome itself. Sulla laid siege to Pompeii directly. Archaeologists have actually found the scars of that siege still embedded in Pompeii's walls today, holes punched by Roman ballista artillery, physical evidence of a war fought 2,000 years ago that you can literally reach out and touch. Pompeii held out, but in 89 BC, it was finally forced to surrender. And here's the strange part. Even though Pompeii lost the war militarily, Rome ended up granting citizenship to nearly every rebelling Italian community anyway, recognizing that the underlying grievance needed a political solution, not just a military one. So did Pompeii actually win? Not exactly. Sulla still made an example of the city. He stripped its political autonomy and renamed it entirely Colonia Cornelia Veneria Pompeianorum, a new identity dedicated in part to the goddess Venus, Sulla's own personal patron. That religious association with Venus would follow the city all the way to its final day. Latin replaced Oscan as the official language. Roman law replaced local custom, and Sulla settled thousands of his own veteran soldiers directly in the city, seizing land from the existing population as both punishment and reward. Tension between the old residents and the new Roman settlers was immediate, but it didn't last. Within a generation or two, intermarriage and shared civic life had blurred the line entirely, forming one unified Roman Pompeian population. Rome's greatest weapon wasn't the sword, it was its ability to make conquered people believe they had always been Roman. Out of that fusion, something genuinely remarkable was about to be built. Under direct Roman administration, Pompeii didn't just recover, it became one of the richest cities in Roman Italy. Historians now call it a near-perfect miniature Roman city, and that's exactly what makes it so valuable to us today. Rome itself has been continuously rebuilt for over 2,000 years, erasing most of its own early layers. Pompeii was frozen at a single moment, which means it preserves a complete cross-section of Roman urban life that survives nowhere else on Earth. Picture walking these streets. Raised stepping stones at every intersection, precisely spaced to match the width of a standard Roman cart axle, letting pedestrians cross flooded, sewage-filled roads without stepping in filth, while carts rolled straight through the gaps. The city's amphitheater, built around 70 BC, predates Rome's own Colosseum by more than a century, one of the oldest stone amphitheaters anywhere in the empire, seating an estimated 20,000 people, nearly double the city's own population, drawing visitors in from every surrounding town. The public bath complex featured a hypercaust, an underfloor heating system circulating hot air beneath raised floors and through the walls, a level of engineered comfort Europe wouldn't see again for over 1,000 years after Rome's fall. Under the stability of Augustus's reign, Pompeii's economy hit its absolute peak. Local elections were genuinely competitive. Painted campaign endorsements still survive on the walls today, some backed by entire trade guilds. Bakers, fruit sellers, laundry workers, all organizing to support their preferred candidates. This was a real, functioning, self-governing community, not a museum piece, a living city. So what actually made Pompeii rich? Garum, a pungent fermented fish sauce so prized it sold at extraordinary prices and shipped across the entire empire. Production vats have been excavated throughout the city, their chemical residues still analyzable today. Wine, grown in that same volcanic soil that made this land so fertile in the first place, carried the Pompeii name to markets across the Mediterranean. Nearly 40 separate flour mills and bakeries kept the city fed and exporting. That's not even the surprising part. Prosperity here wasn't evenly shared. Wealthy families lived in elegant homes with garden courtyards, fish ponds, and elaborate frescoes built specifically to display status. The poor and the enslaved lived crowded into small rooms that often lacked even basic sanitation. Both realities are preserved side by side, beneath the same layer of ash, an unusually honest record of exactly how unequal daily life in a Roman city actually was. Pompeii was also known for its openness about sexuality. Multiple officially operating brothels scattered through the city, the largest containing 10 small rooms across 2 floors. When 19th century archaeologists excavated it, the discovery caused such a scandal that access was restricted for decades, considered too explicit for public viewing under Victorian moral standards. And across every wall in the city, over 11,000 surviving pieces of graffiti, political insults, election endorsements, fraud accusations, love notes, an unfiltered window into the actual voices of ordinary people who lived and argued and flirted here 2,000 years ago. Remember that number from the very beginning of this file. This is the population it was about to apply to. This was a city at its peak, confident, prosperous, entertained. But peace like this rarely stays uninterrupted for long. And Pompeii's first real crack wouldn't come from the mountain at all. It would come from a rival city and a gladiator match that spiraled completely out of control. A game, a crowd, a rivalry that had simmered for years. In 59 AD, that combination turned into a massacre. The historian Tacitus recorded it decades later, a long simmering tension between Pompeii and the neighboring town of Nuceria, finally erupting during a gladiatorial match. Insults turned into thrown stones, stones turned into drawn weapons. By the time it ended, spectators on both sides lay dead or seriously wounded. How does a game turn into a killing? Because in the Roman world, the arena wasn't just entertainment, it was identity. Civic pride, regional rivalry given a stage and a crowd and just enough alcohol to ignite. The event was memorialized in a wall painting discovered inside Pompeii itself, depicting the riot in progress, created by the very community responsible for causing it. Emperor Nero was furious. The Roman Senate banned all gladiatorial games at Pompeii's amphitheater, and the organizers behind the riot were sentenced to permanent exile. For a city where games meant commerce, pride, and civic gathering, this ban was a genuine blow, one significant enough that local elites eventually lobbied to have it lifted early. Historians today consider this one of the earliest documented examples of organized sports violence in recorded history. Hold on to that thought, because 3 years later, Pompeii would face a very different kind of warning, one that had nothing to do with rival cities and everything to do with the ground itself. February 5th, 62 AD. The ground beneath Pompeii cracks open. A severe earthquake, estimated between magnitude 5 and 6, tears through the city. Temples collapse, public buildings crumble. The damage spreads across the entire region, striking neighboring towns including Herculaneum and Nuceria, the very city Pompeii had rioted against just 3 years earlier. A wealthy banker named Lucius Caecilius Jucundus commissioned a marble relief for his household shrine, depicting the earthquake's damage to the city's own forum, a rare, contemporary visual account created by someone who actually lived through it. His financial records, preserved on wax tablets, show property auctions and loans continuing within the same years, proof of how quickly the city's economy clawed its way back. The philosopher Seneca documented the destruction directly in his own writings. The city's aqueduct was severed, cutting off clean water. Some wealthy residents, genuinely afraid, packed up and left the region for good. So did anyone realize what this earthquake actually was? No. Modern geological analysis has since connected this exact earthquake to the same underlying magma system that would erupt 17 years later. This wasn't a separate disaster. It was the first visible chapter of the exact same catastrophe that eventually destroyed the city completely. But the people who stayed didn't retreat. Middle-class residents and recently freed slaves led the rebuilding, and in doing so found real opportunity. The House of the Vetii, one of the most lavishly decorated homes ever excavated at Pompeii, belonged to two freedmen brothers who built their fortune in exactly this period. For the next 17 years, minor aftershocks continued, and the population did something now recognized as a deeply human pattern. Humans have an extraordinary ability to normalize danger, especially when it doesn't kill them immediately. New shops opened directly on top of earthquake rubble. Construction never really stopped. Every brick they laid after that earthquake brought them one step closer to the eruption. 17 years of ordinary life. Rebuilding, feasting, sleeping, directly above a chamber of molten rock that was never actually finished growing. Everything you've just learned, the founding, the wars, the citizenship fight, the fortune built after this exact earthquake, all of it was still standing on the same 17-year countdown. If this is the point where the story stopped feeling like ancient history and started feeling like a warning, that's exactly the reaction this file is built for. Drop a comment with the year you'd have left the city, and subscribe, because what happens next is the part almost nobody actually gets right. For centuries, this event was dated to a single day in August. New evidence says that's wrong. Winter clothing found among the remains, autumn fruit, wine jars already sealed for a season that shouldn't have ended yet if the traditional date were correct. A coin bearing an imperial title, Emperor Titus, isn't known to have held until after September. The evidence increasingly points to October 24th, 79 AD, not the long-accepted August 24th. Even the most settled facts in history can still be wrong. In the days before the eruption, the seismic activity intensified beyond what 17 years had normalized. Wells and streams dried up. Farm animals grew visibly anxious, likely sensing toxic gas escaping through cracks in the ground that humans couldn't detect. No living person had ever witnessed Vesuvius erupt. The mountain had stayed dormant for roughly 1,800 years. The Romans didn't even have a word for volcano. Vesuvius was simply understood as a mountain, nothing more. They had no framework for the danger building beneath their feet. 7 centuries of history had just entered its final 24 hours. At approximately 1 in the afternoon, Vesuvius erupted. A column of ash shot more than 30 kilometers into the sky, visible for miles, releasing energy estimated to rival dozens of nuclear weapons combined. Across the bay in Mycenae, a young man named Pliny the Younger watched it happen, later describing the shape of the rising cloud as resembling an umbrella pine tree. His letters to the historian Tacitus remain the single most detailed eyewitness account of any eruption to survive from the ancient world, so precise that volcanologists still use the term Plinian eruption in his honor. Pumice stone began falling, 15 centimeters an hour, relentless, burying the city gradually enough that many residents managed to flee. Those who fled in this first phase had, by far, the best chance of survival. Those who sheltered instead did not. By evening, the sheer weight of fallen pumice caused rooftops to collapse on the people hiding beneath them. Daylight vanished entirely, buried under ash thick enough to blot out the sun. Then, at roughly 6 the next morning, the pattern broke completely. The eruption column collapsed on itself, unleashing a pyroclastic surge, superheated gas and ash roaring down the mountainside at hundreds of kilometers an hour. Volcanologists have identified at least 6 of these surges. The 4th one, exceeding 300 degrees Celsius, struck Pompeii directly. Death was almost instantaneous. Modern forensic analysis shows thermal shock, not slow suffocation as historians once assumed. Pliny the Elder, a naval commander trying to rescue people near the town of Stabiae, died attempting to study and survive the very disaster that killed him. Remember that number from the very beginning of this file. Modern forensic estimates put the death toll inside the city itself at roughly 15 to 20% of its population, somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 people, which means the vast majority of Pompeii actually got out. Not everyone died frozen in place. Most of the bodies you've seen in photographs, in documentaries, in museum casts, belong to the minority who stayed, or who simply ran out of time. The real story isn't that Pompeii died instantly and completely. It's that most of the city survived the actual eruption, and it was the 17 years before it, the ones spent quietly normalizing the danger, that decided who wouldn't. Pompeii disappeared beneath 4 to 6 meters of volcanic ash, erased from every map, forgotten for nearly 1,500 years. And then, in the 18th century, excavators uncovered something no one in the history of archaeology had ever seen before. Bread, still sitting in the ovens. Graffiti, still legible on the walls. An entire Roman city caught mid-breath. In the 1860s, archaeologist Giuseppe Fiorelli pioneered a technique that changed everything, pouring liquid plaster into the hollow cavities left in the hardened ash. By decomposed bodies, capturing the exact final posture, the exact final expression of the people who died there. Families huddled together, a dog still chained, people shielding their faces from something they never saw coming. That's the detail that should stay with you after everything else fades, because this was never really a story about a volcano. It's a story about 700 years of human beings. Oscans, Greeks, Etruscans, Samnites, Romans building, warring, trading, rebuilding, laughing, arguing and falling in love on top of a mountain that was, this entire time, simply waiting. Pompeii wasn't frozen by history, it was interrupted by it. And when the mountain finally spoke, it did what no war, no siege, no rival city had ever managed to do in 700 years. It ended the story completely, and accidentally preserved every part of it. If this file finally gave you the full picture, that's exactly why this dossier exists. Every file we unseal follows the same rule. The ending is never the whole story. Subscribe now, so the next file reaches you the moment it's declassified. Because somewhere, right now, another mountain is simply waiting.